welcome back to the
Hello.
Beer Ladies podcast. Hello.
Welcome.
Today's topic is malt tonics and medicinal beers. It's actually part 1 of 2. So today we're going to talk about malt tonics, and in part 2, we're going to talk about medicinal beer. So I'm your host, Christina, today, and I'm here with Bean and Lisa. And before I get too far ahead of myself,
Hello.
I want to remind you all to check us out on YouTube, and you can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. So Spotify, places like that. Okay? So,
Woohoo.
Like, subscribe, do the things here.
yes, do all the things. So
Be the one person like me on Overcast
yes.
or Apple Podcasts, or it's okay to
Wherever
be
you
other
get
podcasts.
them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think we should start with what are you drinking? So I'm going to ask Lisa, what are you drinking?
So I decided to sort of be on theme today in a strange way. So we went out and scoured our local sort of our local ethnic grocery stores as it were. So I have 3 Horses Malta. So it is a Dutch but brewed in Germany malt beverage. So technically non-alcoholic, and it does say that it has vitamins to make me healthy. So, you know, covering all the bases. I've not given it a sip yet, but it's a dark, interesting color, and it smells like wort. So it's at least halfway to being beer, if nothing else. But we'll see. But I bet Bean has something really interesting.
Ha! Look, Bean is on the yellow belly, and
Hey, that's good.
now they used to have a membership thing, and this was in like the back of the cabinet from like 2019. So I've got some, but the art is so much fun. This is their
wow.
member berries,
Oh, lovely.
which is it's 4.2 alcohol by volume. It's a fruit beer. It is
Is
unfiltered.
it Battle Cat it has
unpasteurized.
on it? It's got it all going on that artwork.
Their artist was like a bit mad, but it's very there's like a DeLorean or something with berries in it. Yeah, the art is mad, so I'll definitely post a photo of that.
Definitely.
There's some Pilsner and wheat, and black currants and blackberries and raspberries. And I'm afraid you can't get this anymore, but you can get yellow belly. And then I'm gonna pull the same trick in the next half and do a yellow belly beer that they used to make. But look, I'm having one look back at the past, and then it's forward from here.
Yeah, that's from the before times. So that's
yeah.
you know, time travel.
It really is. That's what DeLoreans are all about.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. It has berries. It has.
There we go.
That sounds
I feel
lovely,
like
to be
it's got-
honest.
But maybe it's in the wrong half. Actually, maybe I'm like crossing the streams. Darn it! I was taught not to cross the streams. Child of the 80s and 90s, but here
sometimes
I
you
am.
need to, though. Yes.
Yeah.
It
Brilliant.
sounds really good. What do you think of it?
Oh, you know what? It's lasted in the can pretty well. It is quite clear.
Oh, yeah.
It is a little tired, but when it first came out of the can, I was like, oh, berries. I can still, now it tastes almost like sort of a hibiscus rose, like a rose hip tea kind of thing.
Okay.
But when it came out of
I
the
like a
can
rose
right
hip
away,
tea.
it was like real kind of, oh, I can taste blackberries. But, you know, now I think it's kind of given off its flavors, and now it's kind of gone like more quiet, more hibiscus and rosehip tea, but I can still get a little berry, but it's a nice color. It's a very apricot-y pink.
Yeah.
And it's still got some head on it after a little while. It's actually probably been at coming to room temperature for a little bit longer than it might have actually. But yeah, no,
fair enough.
Good for them, and hooray.
Awesome. It sounds really good. I wish that I would have had a taste of that when it was out, because it's the whole thing sounds lovely, from the berries to the rose hip to the, yeah, that sounds just gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, did you tell me, Christina, that one of their brewers is off doing his thing in Otter Bank Brewing?
Yes, Otter Bank. Yep.
Yeah.
Brooklyn.
Yeah. So if you love Yellow Belly, you can get all their core Yellow Belly. And if you want to try something more experimental, Otter Bank would be a very tied in sort of
Good thinking.
thing. Man, that Saison, I wish I had 2 bottles of that, because I had one, so it begins, and then I really wanted a second one to save. So that's what I would say about that.
Oh, very cool. What am I drinking? I'm going one with a classic for me. Ballycilcavan Brewery's Brickyard Red Ale. I've drank this a lot. I will continue to drink this a lot. Since we're talking about malt tonic, following on with Lisa's multi drink, I figured I'd go with more malt forward beer. So yeah, traditional Irish red ale with a rich malty caramel base. Does exactly what it says on the tin. Great beer. Enjoy it. Probably should pour it in a glass, but I'm not gonna, because I'm lazy.
And a gorgeous beer. I was so glad that my local Lidl had some. I was able to pick a couple up before they all disappeared. So fresh and delicious. Gorgeous.
I got this in Lidl today. I did not go in to look for it because I thought they'd be all picked over.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they were at some point, but I must have just made it at like the perfect time, because all of a sudden I saw the boxes and I was like, ooh.
The restocking fairy has been here.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think I just got the right time, but yeah, I was able to get some before it was picked over, and I was so excited just to be able to have that close, and when you're grocery shopping, just be able to pick that right up. It's really nice.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's an amazing beer to be getting in Lidl.
Right?
Yeah.
Really, really good. The beer that I have for part 2 of this is actually also a beer that I picked up from Lidl, from an Irish brewery.
Ooh.
So, it's really nice to see that accessibility when you're just going grocery shopping, to just be able to be like, oh yes, you know what? I'm just going to pick up this one here, or, 2 here. Just, when you're kind of walking through, I think that's just nice to be able to do.
It's so nice to get some local things, especially when you look at your Marks and Spencers and things, where in a post-Brexit world, it's just empty shelves. There's nothing there. And it's like, well, you could have been stocking more local stuff anyway, guys. Yeah. So, but yeah, so Lidl, good, fair play to them for, stocking more local stuff. It's good to see them stocking Ballycilcavan and 4 Provinces. And it's just, long may that continue.
Yes, no, definitely.
You're here.
Agree. Yes, and before we get too far into the ins and outs of Irish beer and the delights of access, perhaps we should turn to our topic at hand.
Indeed.
Which is malt tonic.
Yes. And what is a malt tonic? I'm sure all of our listeners are wondering, because it's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
Even our hosts want to know, what is a malt tonic, girls?
Yeah, so I can answer that one. So I actually made a malt tonic about this time last year, which I'll get into in a little bit. But it was an experience. So for reasons which I will explain. So in general, malt tonics were derived from, as the name suggests, malt and hops, but often thicker. They could be thicker. They also contained a range of additives. So my malt tonic was made with calamus root, and I'll explain what that is later. There's other malt tonics, famous malt tonics. Pabst was one that made a particularly famous one. We also have brands like Traumer's or Malton. They had additives like iron, cod liver oil, or, strychnine.
Strychnine, cocaine, whatever,
the thing that we use to kill rats. Yeah. So in all your crime novels, someone usually runs afoul of this particular poison, but they used to use it in malt tonics, so that's fun.
Absolutely.
And these malt tonics often contained as much alcohol as beer, if not more alcohol than beer. So, for example, Dr. Charles Harrington, he surveyed like 21 different malt tonics, and he found that all of them were alcoholic, and some of them were stronger than ale, beer, or even porter. Which it's interesting that he makes a designation between ale, beer, and porter.
Mm.
But that's a tangent for another day. But I find that really interesting that those are three, three different ways of viewing.
Yeah, 3 different levels, I guess, that he
Yeah.
thought of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that there's a difference between, I mean, from a medievalist point of view, ale and beer are different because one's hopped and one's not hopped. But then ale, beer, and porter being, so it might just be someone who's not particularly familiar with beer, talking about beer. I mean, that could be the case, or it could be that these are really different definitions for Harrington, that would
Yeah.
make sense in the time frame, and that is something that we should dig into, actually.
Yeah, because I've definitely come across old, especially sort of 19th century adverts where porter is very much its own thing, and stout could be anything strong, but
Right?
it could be any color of the rainbow practically. But then that sort of disappears and changes depending on where you're coming from, and but then especially when you're tying it to sort of the malt tonic sort of patent medicine idea. I mean, again, it can be anything. You just have to say
Right.
it's healthy. It's going to
Yeah,
do all these things. And
exactly.
all good. You don't have to prove it. It's you don't have to say what's in it. It'll just do everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like literally the reason why they were called malt tonics is because the company said so. There's no reason why it's medicinal besides they said it was medicinal. That's it. That's
Classic snake oil.
yeah.
100%.
Cures all the things
Yeah.
all the time.
It's literally what it was, and it's just so fascinating that back in the day, to use that phrase, you could basically be like, yes, it will cure everything. People are like, oh yes, okay, I'm gonna take that.
Yeah, it's all fine, especially like all the things you could take to make babies sleep. Again, you could have a lot of, we could have a lot of alcohol, but you could also have, again, strychnine and all kinds of other things. So that the sleep could be a lot longer than, what maybe was anticipated. But again, depending on your target audience, if your audience was sort of baby farmers, they're like, yeah, that'll do. So there's a whole rabbit hole you could go down there. And back a long time ago, back in the day, I used to work in a medical archives, and they have amazing ads from 19th and early 20th century that were specifically targeted at female physicians. And like, you don't get them sort of super gender differentiated until kind of the 1920s and 30s, but the early ones are all just straight up patent medicine. There's no real, sort of efficacy or, there's no kind of science involved at all. It's all just like, you're a doctor, you'll prescribe this to anyone. And they did. But you didn't need a prescription either, but it's fascinating. And you could do a whole side tangent in terms of like the other things they specifically targeted female doctors to help say when a patient absolutely can't get pregnant, because of course you don't want to, get in the way of anything unless you really have to. And then there's other things to bring on stopped menses, and you're like, I wonder what that's all about. But as long as you, keep within the right sort of language, you could sell anything to do anything. So it's a whole thing. But I've definitely seen some things that were marketed as malt tonics, like to physicians too. And I wonder how different this was, again, a PhD for someone, how different it is, like what was marketed to the general public versus, to doctors. It's, you have to think there's probably some differentiation.
No, that's a really interesting question to bring up. Like, how and why did they decide, and what was the wording, and did they change the verbiage based on like the audience and that kind of thing? That would be a really interesting thesis if anyone's looking for a topic.
I know. Absolutely. And again, like my day job is, doing all of this kind of thing in big grown-up pharma, where you have to be so careful and tie everything back to very specific claims, and which is good. You don't want to just be making stuff up, but it's interesting how long it took for that to become the norm, just decades and decades and decades, and only because a lot of bad things happened until you got to that point. So it's a very interesting history that people sometimes want to kind of sweep under the carpet too. But again, it's so interesting that this is really direct to consumer kind of stuff. I mean, you're selling to, mothers. I think I think probably there's that whole sort of, mother's little helper kind of thing, and you're helping people with insomnia, or you're helping people who want to feel younger. Like it's everything. There's no one no one purpose.
Yeah, just to pick up on that before I lose my train of thought, I actually
Yes.
have some quotes from some Pabst best malt tonic ads that are exactly what you just said. So I'm gonna share those now, and then we can kind of have a talk about
Yeah.
the misogyny and the sexism in here. So Pabst Extract Best Tonic was billed as a, quote, nutritive tonic, not a stimulant, a food that makes flesh and blood, bringing roses to the cheek and plumpness to the wasted form, while soothing the fretted nerves like a mother's kiss.
Oh.
Which just that's not too bad, right? That sounds, but not too bad. Now we'll get into this 1904 ad that says, quote, "This is woman's era," says an eminent writer. "Women's advancement has added new responsibilities to the burdens nature has already imposed upon her. With frail body and shattered nerves, how can she carry this double burden? The pallid face, the sunken cheek, the lusterless eye tell the story of overtaxed strength and of nervous energy drained to the dregs. The deep lines that furrow the once beautiful
Oh
face
no.
cannot be rubbed out with lotions or cosmetics. The glory and strength of womanhood must be restored from within. As a rebuilder and revitalizer, perfectly adapted to her needs, she can find nothing that will equal Pabst Extract, the best tonic."
Wow.
Preach. Bring on the laudanum.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
went for it though.
Oh man, cheers
Yeah.
to that.
I mean, we can talk about the sexism. I think it's important when we're talking about malt tonics to also acknowledge that there's definitely like racism and classism
Oh
at
yeah.
play here. They're definitely targeting white women of a certain class with these. That's definitely who they're talking about. Though this one in particular is aimed at working women,
Yeah.
Yes.
which is interesting, I think. Of course, all
Our
this
era has
sexism and that.
come and your nerves are shot.
Yes, yes.
We've come so far.
No, but
Yeah,
I
it's
do.
Virginia Slims. Yeah. Wow.
I think that's really interesting that they are talking about, okay, you're working, but nature says that you also have to be, a mom. So
And you have to be
wow.
gorgeous and you have to do all
Yeah.
these things. Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we've moved on from that,
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
good
like,
that we have.
honestly, this ad could exist right now with just different like words, and no one would blink an eye at it because it is the same shite that we've been
Yeah.
told for forever.
Absolutely.
Just repackaged.
Mhm.
And in the same vein, they have an entire pamphlet called "Baby Secrets,"
Ooh.
which explained that the extract is, quote, "an ideal preparation for nursing mothers, giving them abundant nourishment to resist the extra drain upon the system."
Well, I mean, at least there's something to that. Like you do need additional calories, and there you go. But yeah, I mean, I like that. The lactation consultant we had was just like, just have a Guinness. It's fine. So all good. But oh my.
Yes, and they were supposed to have a bottle a day for 24 days to restore beauty.
Oh, well, as long as you're going to be pretty again, that's important.
Yes, who cares about, your mental health? We're here for you to be pretty. Although in fairness, these malt tonics were marketed for nerves, which is sort of the all-encompassing thing of anxiety and depression. So they were kind of marketed to kind of alleviate some of those things. And they were marketed for insomnia and those sorts of things. And they, to be clear, they were not just marketed to women. They were absolutely marketed to men. I have a picture actually that I can tweet about how they were marketed to young and old. It's a picture actually of a elder gentleman and a child cheersing the Rainier beer habit that brings the glow
Aw.
of health and gives new lease on life. No medicine can equal it as a tonic.
Well, there you go.
So, so there's that. Yeah, it's really interesting. how they were marketed and how they're very popular they were. They were incredibly popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And to think about it too, like clearly all these large, big commercial breweries like a Pabst or a Rainier too are also certainly, huge regionally and then would get bigger too. Like just think about what percentage they might have been devoting to this. They wouldn't be doing that if it didn't, shift units. So, something's going out the door, and it's a pre-prohibition too. So it's not like that's their aim. It's just they're selling these things like candy.
Yeah, pre-pro and after. Like they I mean, they were making these things, 1965, things like that. These went on for a long time. Quite popular.
Yeah. Well, and then when you sort of shift the lens too, and sort of how these have grown globally, like, certainly Guinness has their own whole, sort of version of this kind of now malt tonic type beverage that they make in Nigeria and sell all over Africa. And then it's also gone sort of to the Caribbean as well, but they don't quite go as all out, but they do sort of still say this is going to make you stronger. It's going to make you healthier. You're going to have this vitality. And there's obviously a little more wiggle room in terms of what you can and can't say. They're not quite saying it's a medicine, but it's still really being positioned as kind of a sort of post-exercise drink almost, which, it's no different from a Gatorade really, in that it's got some sugar and, I guess with the malt, you can at least say there's some maybe B vitamins or something like that. So broadly speaking, it's not going to be any worse for you. Although I have to say, if the one I'm going by is any relation, it's a little heavy. So... But it's funny too, because at least the one I'm drinking, which again is not from Guinness, but is a sort of broadly similar beverage, it says low sugar, full taste. And then on the back it says with sugar and sweetener. I'm like, well, okay, which is it then? So it's interesting. I'll give it that, but it does kind of have this like health food store in the 70s kind of vibe about it. So you can see that through line is still there, even though it's, they can't obviously be quite as bold, I suppose, in their marketing, but it's, this kind of drink is still around and still very popular in some places, and it's got a thing going on. So, although I'm gonna have to say, very sweet.
Must be that no sugar.
It must be the no sugar. Yeah, absolutely. I can 100% see how children would be like, yep, this is for me. It's very sweet, but again, very kind of, like when you're sort of, if you're home brewing, so any home brewers, like when you're smelling your wort, it's basically just that. There's no other kind of complexity to it. I mean, it's not trying to be beer, but it's still, for anyone who likes beer, like, oh, we're like 2/3 of the way there, and then like fermentation stopped. So.
It's really interesting. And we'll get more into that in part 2, because I want to talk about Guinness in particular, and their medicinal beers, and also like ancient medicinal beers, and we'll kind of talk about that. But it's really, really interesting how beer has sort of been repackaged again and again as medicine, and that takes the form of malt tonic as we're talking about now, but it also just beer as medicine, just straight up beer. As a medication, which is really
absolutely. Or again, as a kind of recovery drink, we're seeing more and more kind of lower non-alcoholic beers being promoted as sort of, oh, you've gone for your run, you better, sort of rehydrate with this. And, I do love if there were in-person racing and things like that, I love a nice beer at the end of a run or that kind of thing. But I think that it's interesting that it's so overt now to tie it back to like, oh, but this is going to get you, ready to go back out and run again. I'm like, is it? I'm not really sure about that. Like I could see the rehydration, and I could see some too might have electrolytes, but it's also like, but really, like, come on, we can also just, enjoy having a beer at the end. It doesn't have to have a kind of, noble purpose. It can be a reward.
Yeah,
yes,
it's totally.
And I would prefer to have a beer than a Gatorade personally. Like, it just sounds better.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be that weird color unless it's one of those weird exploding milkshake beers that you see on the internet these days. But no, thank you.
Yeah, no.
Make mine a Pabst Blue Ribbon like the Mary Chapin Carpenter song. I'm a town. I've never had a Pabst Blue Ribbon. I don't know how that would taste.
I actually don't think I've had one either.
I did once, but sort of such a ridiculous, hipster kind of thing, like .com era San Francisco, where it was a bar that only served Pabst Blue Ribbon as a flex, and it looked like it was a mountain lodge inside, but it pretended to have this sort of blue collar type, and obviously it didn't, because it was like, even back then, like a $6 Pabst Blue Ribbon. So it was ridiculous. So that
That's
is the only time I've ever had one, and I was like, I mean, I guess this isn't bad, but really,
That's $6.
it was
Like,
Now you've got a story.
in 1998. So yeah, it was a
that's
big deal.
really
then.
high for 98. Wow.
Well, San Francisco's always been pricey, and it was, it was on a night out with other tech nerds, and it was that whole crowd. So money didn't mean anything then.
Oh yeah, back in
That's
the day.
good fun.
I suppose I should
In
probably
retrospect.
I should probably talk about the malt tonic I made, and how I made it and why I made it.
Yes, absolutely.
All that stuff. So if you look up US patent applications, you can actually get sort of these old, over 100-year-old patents for these malt tonics. So I did some research and I pulled a particular one, Moses H. Kluber. So Moses, thank you for the recipe. It was a lot of fun to make. Appreciate it. He was of Dodge City, Kansas, and he applied for a patent for his, quote, medicated or tonic beer. And he said about his beer, he said, quote, "My beverage is an improved beer, which is healthful, palatable, and not intoxicating, and therefore adapted for use by all classes of persons." So that's what Moses is aiming for. Before I get too much into that, and actually Bean can talk about this a little bit as well, because she did a lot of research about this this particular root, this calamus root. So calamus root is in this particular malt tonic, and it's illegal to use in food and drink in the United States. Here in the EU, it's not, except for the tetraploid form of the root is illegal here, which is obviously not the form that I have. I have something that you can easily find in health food shops. It can be, in some forms, it can be carcinogenic, and apparently can have all sorts of terrible side effects. So this is me basically saying, do this at your own risk. I'm not encouraging you to make this malt tonic with calamus root on your own,
or pay attention.
Yeah, don't
Here.
Don't make this and get sick or arrested if it's illegal where you are, or just be careful, okay? So yeah, I've covered myself. I don't know, Bean, do you want to add anything into the research that you kind of did on?
Cameras everywhere. Exactly.
No, I think that's probably it. Don't make yourself sick. Well, actually, I was a little worried. I was a little worried. You sent along your blog post, and I'm like, should I say something? Should I maybe say, don't drink that, you might be sick and it might give you cancer? Because the more I went on to Wikipedia, I did not in-depth research. This was like yesterday. I go on to Wikipedia and it looks, for all the world, like the young inflorescence looks like the flowering spike of an arum lily, or like a peace lily. Like, I know not to eat lords and ladies, like that will make you very sick and throw up, and like that looks poisonous. And like I think I found a bunch of things, but like they all conspired to sort of say, this might be best if you were so lucky as to have sort of a perfect triumvirate of things going for you. Like you had maybe some elders of a community who had a population of plants they'd been eating for a long time. They knew them very well. They prepared them to take out all the things that would be carcinogenic, or they, like, the best would be all three, right? They trust their plants, they know their plants, they've prepared their plants to extract all the bad stuff, leave in the good stuff, and maybe even they know other plants as well, that they put them with the preparation, and that the chemicals like neutralize each other or help each other. It's in kind
Yeah.
of an Ayurvedic medicine. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I was slightly concerned.
Yeah, like
It's like,
I
I
mean,
don't want my friend to die.
I mean, calamus root, you might be more familiar with it because it's also known as sweet flag or sweet myrtle. And it's been around as medicine for years in parts of Europe and Asia. And exactly like you're saying, being like by people who knew what they were doing, using exactly what they were supposed to use in the context in which they were supposed to use it. It was used to treat stomach issues and anxiety, things like that. Again, I'm not encouraging you to go out and use this, but it does seem to be the case of, there are people out there very well versed in understanding and using this herb and or root, I should say.
Yeah, and there's
And they've
lots
been
of
using it.
people. Sorry, cut you off. There's like lots of people who are totally interested in trying to become a little bit more um, humbly seeking the indigenous knowledge and then applying scientific method and
Right.
making hopefully respectfully the medicines into more robustly tested medicines, and that would be really cool. But then there's also this, like, sometimes I get a little bit excited for something like this. I hear it, I'm like, I wonder if this could be the silver bullet, and I just will get the whatever Oprah is talking about, and it will preventatively heal me forever. I mean, at the end of the day, we kind of all know that you just have to like let your food be your medicine and eat a little bit of all the good things in season and move your body and breathe and all that. But yeah, it's definitely exciting when you learn about a new plant for the first time and you're like, people have done this, people have tried this, people have used this. This is weird. And maybe I'm sure that there must be some like maybe in probably in even where I come from, there's probably some like Cree and Dene people who are like, actually, we could tell you a bit about this. And maybe I wonder if their advice might be something like each person needs a different medicine for their thing at a different time. So probably, I don't know, if it's going to be like a strong medicine, you might just want to be desperate. But the adventurous palate is where we're at too as beer ladies. We like to try something new. So
Try
yeah, it's
all the
fun to
things.
research.
Try all the things. And
Absolutely.
Be safe, do your own research.
Yeah, the version that I got online from the health food store, it's a tea. It was fine. I'm alive. It's okay.
Yay!
Because as I said, it's perfectly legal here in the EU, as long as it's the certain version of it, not the one that's cancerous and problematic. So, the EU, I think, does a good job
Right.
at being able to differentiate what is potentially dangerous and what just really isn't. So in that vein, I can kind of talk to you about the ingredients of the malt tonic. So
Yes.
you needed 14 ounces of malt, which was just malt, which is, I mean, not very specific, but, there we go. I just use a basic base malt. 7 ounces of rye flour. For this, I used rye malt, actually. 1/2 ounce of ground calamus root, 1/5 ounce of crushed spearmint. I use just regular mint. A fourth ounce of hops, 1/10 ounce of lemon oil, 1/2 ounce or a little bit of 1/2 ounce of fresh yeast, 1/2 ounce of lemon peel, 16 ounces of sugar, and 3 gallons of water. So this was interesting because
now, did he give the proportions or? Oh, sorry. Yeah, did he give the proportions, or were those your own proportions?
Those are his proportions. So I'm following his patent to the.
Those are okay.
Yeah, those are his proportions. Those are
to
not.
The letter.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, the patents are generally the ones that I found.
It's a lot of sugar, but yeah, makes sense.
The ones that I found are really specific with what they're going to tell you specifically to use and how to make it. So this actually, I found this particular malt tonic to be really interesting because he uses sort of the old brewing techniques that we kind of see, where you make kind of a cracker or a dough with the rye and the rye malt and the whatever he's calling just a regular malt. So basically you mix them together with the warm water and then you let that stand for 12 hours. So you basically mix them together with water and you leave it. And then you wait and then you knead this into a dough. And then you roll it into like about a 1-inch thick sheet on like just like a cookie sheet or you know, like a baking pan, whatever you want to do. And then you bake it on low until it's quote hard and brown. And then you can cut it into pieces 6 inches in diameter. Now he had it cut prior, but I cut it after because I thought it was easier to cut when they're already like kind of cookies. So at this point, they're like caramelized malt biscuits. And I have a picture of these. They were delicious. Like they were really good, like just yummy malt treats. So then the cutting and the size don't actually matter because you're just going to break this up and smash it into tiny pieces.
Right.
And then you dump that into 2 gallons of boiling water. You boil that until it's all dissolved. And then you add another gallon of water, which is cold. Then you cover it for an hour. And then you strain it. So I will say that I have the recipe because my pots are not like able to handle like, 4 gallons of water. That's a massive pot. So I halved this recipe. I should say that. So at this point, you boil it for an hour. And then you add the calamus root, the hops, the lemon peel, the mint, and then you boil it for an additional 10 minutes. So as I said, I didn't have spearmint, so I just used basic mint that I got at Lidl. For hops, I tried to use sort of one of the oldest kinds of hops that are still like kicking around today because the history of hops is really interesting, but we don't really have access to sort of these old historical. And when I'm saying old and historical, I mean by medievalist definition, old and historical. So old hops. We don't have those anymore. So
Yeah.
I use Hallertau Mittelfrüh, which is sort of one of the oldest ones you can sort of still get your hands on. Now,
it's like the Pabst Blue Ribbon of hops. It's an oldie, but
it's an oldie but a goodie. Yeah. So now this is where things kind of get tricky because it becomes illegible to kind of understand what he's saying at this point, because he says to dissolve the sugar in 1/2 gallon of the who knows. So I guessed it was solution or fusion or infusion. So that's what I did. I dissolved the sugar in 1/2 gallon of whatever I just made. And then I strained this and I added it to the main mixture. I will say that I completely half-arsed the straining. I need to pick up probably cheesecloth to be honest with you to really get this properly strained. My strainer just was not good enough for this.
Right.
So I am going to make this again, but I'm actually going to franken brew another one out of several different malt tonic recipes and kind of come up with my own thing. So then you allow it to stand until the temperature is lowered to 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty straightforward. To dissolve the yeast in a small quantity of the mixture, add this, and then you add alcohol. It just says alcohol, which is vague. So I just went with gin because it has like lemon in it, and I figured, lemon, gin, London dry gin, fine. You add this in the lemon extract, then you let it stand for 8 to 10 hours. Until, quote, a white froth of foam appears, which will indicate that the beer is made and ready to be put into bottles or other receptacles for use. So yeah, I did that, wait till the next morning, and I checked it, and it was really thick, but it had some carbonation. So definitely the carbonation is there. So I waited a little bit longer, and then I had my malt tonic. So what did I think of it? It was really lemony. The aroma was incredibly lemony, with hints of malt and mint. Again, the flavor was really lemon heavy with hints of mint, but it went really well together. To be honest with you, the Hallertau hops worked really well as well. It added like a nice bitterness to all the sugar and the malty sweetness. it was okay. To be honest with you, it was nice. It wasn't bad. I mean, I didn't magically feel.
It wasn't bad. There we go. Better, straighter, faster.
And it was for history.
Yeah, no, no, actually, I said this last year in my article, but I actually had a migraine at the time. And the malt tonics were meant to like cure that, but I have to tell you that it actually did nothing for that.
Well, it was historically with the times then, because that's what I hear they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it did not help the headache, but it, it tasted okay. So there's that. I think you could probably like completely simplify the recipe and turn it into a cocktail, which I think would be quite nice. So that is on the agenda for the next
absolutely. I think there's a lot of scope for that.
I do love mint.
And mint and lemon work really well. They work so very well together. So that's on the agenda for February, is turning this into a cocktail and then Franken brewing another malt tonic.
Yeah, and choosing your own adventure with like what you've got around.
See, we all have lockdown goals. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I won't put any rat poison in mine though. I've just kind of ruled that whole thing out as an additive.
No.
I just not going to go with that. I know it might be a bold choice, but I'm just not going to try to murder people.
No, you won't get the lovely whites of your eyes that I think that's what, or no, your pupils dilate, right? I think if you have the strychnine, there's something, it's how it's meant to beautify you before it then subsequently kills you. But
that was like
other ways to look good.
Oh, belladonna used to do that
Oh, yes.
too.
Yeah, that was belladonna. Yeah.
Yes, belladonna. Yes, you're right.
People used to, they used to stick droppers of belladonna in their eyes to make their eyes look like more like bedroom eyes.
Yeah. And like the lead in the middle. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might be tempted to like substitute maybe with some like, I don't know, Tulsi or Ashwanga or whatever else. But
yeah, lots of options. Definitely.
Yeah.
Make mine a mint, I think.
But not poison. I think we'll just go ahead.
Yeah, no poison.
Yeah, on balance. Anything that might cause you harm and isn't going to look it. As long, I mean, we have to trust ourselves and our listeners. Do the right thing by yourself.
Yes.
Be adventuresome, but not too adventuresome.
Be careful with yourself.
Yeah, we
don't make
we want you to
poison.
survive. No warfarin in your tonics.
Well, I think maybe we should wrap up on the tonics because
that's a good point too. Yes.
Lots to talk about in terms of like medicinal beer, which we can kind of talk about in part 2. So if we want to wrap up there, any final thoughts, Lisa and Bean?
That was it.
There's a lot, we could unpack there. And I think, again, PhDs for people in there, definitely. But certainly, tune in for the second half of this. There's going to be a lot more. So we're excited to have you back.
So thank you so much again for listening. And remember to check us out on our socials and listen to us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you.
Thank you. Like, subscribe, don't drink poison. Yay.
Bye. See you next time.